Congratulations, true crime addicts. We've survived another week. It is Friday, February 14th, 2025. This week, Brian Kohberger's attorney is an idiot. A reporter's death uncovers a weird crime spree, and all hell breaks loose at a wedding reception. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Yes. Super excited. We are all pumped to have James Renner.
James Renner on.
That James Renner has zeroed in on.
James Renner once again drops a bombshell.
Investigative journalist, reporter James Renner, who's been on the podcast, longtime friend of mine.
And we're back with more true crime this week, and I'm your host, James Renner. There's the James Renner bell. Hey, do you know what day it is? I'll tell you what, if you leave me a good review for this podcast on Apple Podcasts, I'll be your Valentine. Our love affair will be brief and weird, but not uninteresting. Speaking of brief and weird, my next true crime book, Scout Camp, comes out February 25th. It's just around the corner, 10 days from now. 11? I can't do math. Scout Camp tells the story of the abuse scandal within the Boy Scouts, but also it also tells the story of when I worked as a camp counselor at Ohio's largest Boy Scout camp in 1995. I was just 17 years old. It was a crazy summer. There was a death. One of the camp counselors died under mysterious circumstances. Another had to leave camp, never to come back. And there was a weird, creepy secret society involved. So it's a mix of all that, and it gets into a lot of different crimes and mysteries, and I hope you'll enjoy it. It was really personal for me to write. It's called Scout Camp. Available for pre-order, and as you know, as I've said before, pre-orders are what make authors get onto those bestseller lists, and it really helps out. So if you get a chance, if you want to read the book, pre-order. It will be available in bookstores everywhere on February 25th. I'm super, super nervous and a little excited, so let me know what you think. As always, I want to thank my buddy Walter for manning the camera. Walter's just back from his confirmation hearings on the Hill behind the Quickie Mart. Anyways, thanks, Walter, for being here. Let's get to the top stories. There's a lot to talk about this week, and Brian Kohberger's back in the news. I want to talk about him first. Did you see the headlines this week proclaiming that the charges against Brian Kohberger may be dismissed? It's all baloney, and I'll break it down for you now. 30-year-old Brian Kohberger stands accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students in the early morning hours of November 13, 2022. Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, Kaylee Goncalves, and Ethan Chapin were all found stabbed to death in their bedrooms at a condo they shared in Moscow, Idaho. Another roommate living at the home looked out into the hallway after hearing odd sounds around 4:17 a.m. that morning and saw a single male dressed in black with a mask covering his mouth and nose, and she watched as this man walked out of the sliding glass doors. Then she locked herself in her room. The media frenzy following the murders was crazy intense, especially on TikTok, where armchair sleuths pointed fingers at several innocent people. But then, on December 30th of that year, the FBI and state police arrested Brian Kohberger at his parents' home in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. Now, Kohberger was a bit of an odd duck. He has a degree in psychology and a master's in criminal justice. About 6 months before the murders, he moved to Washington State to pursue a PhD at Washington State University, which is less than 8 miles from Moscow, Idaho, where the murders occurred. Faculty at WSU had recently met with him to discuss concerns about his conduct, and he was eventually terminated as a teaching assistant due to his behavior, which included sexism and being rude to women. At the time of his arrest, Kohberger was found in his parents' kitchen wearing plastic gloves and putting trash into separate Ziploc baggies. That certainly doesn't sound guilty. But what led FBI to Kohberger was an important piece of evidence, a knife sheath that was found on Mogen's bed. A forensic exam of the leather sheath found touch DNA, which they were able to link to Kohberger using genetic genealogy. Authorities also discovered that Kohberger had purchased a K-bar knife and sheath from Amazon several months before the attack. Now, a K-bar is like a military-style knife. I believe it's used by the Marines, and it matches the sort of weapon that the killer used in the attacks. As far as evidence goes, it doesn't get much better than that. But now, Kohberger's lead defense attorney, Ann Taylor, is taking a page from the inept defense attorneys in the Delphi case and is attempting to seed doubt that may be used as a strategy at Kohberger's trial. At a hearing recently to have Kohberger's arrest warrants thrown out, Taylor brought up two other sources of DNA that were found at the crime scene and said it could mean that Kohberger is innocent, according to Fox 13. Yes, in fact, male DNA was discovered in blood found on a handrail in the house and also on a glove found outside. That DNA does not match Kohberger. However, there are several explanations for the presence of this DNA. First of all, the glove was outside. And as for the DNA found on the handrail, have you ever been inside a condo shared by half a dozen college students? There is DNA everywhere. It is not known how long the blood was there or if it was left behind by a previous tenant. Also, it's possible that Kohberger himself planted it there since he was obsessed with criminology and the habits of killers in a way to kind of divert police attention. That's one theory that's being tossed around. It also doesn't explain how the sheath of his knife ended up on the dead girl's bed, or how a car matching the type he was driving showed up on video near the crime scene that night, or why his cell phone was turned off during the attacks, or why it pinged near the crime scene when it was turned on again, or how he matched the description provided by the eyewitness, or why he was interviewing murderers on Reddit and asking them questions about how they chose their victims. Everybody deserves a good defense, but a good defense attorney will work with the facts and not try to mislead the jury. But we're seeing this a lot lately, with the defense attorneys for Richard Allen in the Delphi murders case being the best and worst example. Allen's attorneys, Andrew Baldwin and Brad Rozzi, ignored their client's 60 confessions and tried to convince the jury that a weird local cult killed Abby Williams and Libby German, kind of turning the trial into a circus. Luckily, the judge in Kohberger's case doesn't seem fazed. During the hearing, he pointed out that the other DNA certainly doesn't explain away the knife sheath that links Kohberger to the crime scene itself. Taylor, the defense attorney, tried to muddy the waters with that evidence as well, saying, quote, "What does a knife sheath at a scene even mean?" End quote. To which the prosecutor replied, quote, "If you're killed by a knife, it probably means a lot." End quote. I love that. Like, that's such a, like, in the heat of the moment, such a sick burn by the prosecutor. Not often do you get a chance to, like, put somebody in their place like that. Anyways, I love how that played out. But hopefully this isn't a sign of what's to come in the Kohberger trial, because after Delphi, I don't know that I could be put through that again. But we'll see. We'll see. Probably his best shot is a plea deal here, but just to avoid the death penalty. Because if he goes to trial and gets convicted on everything, they will put him to death. So that would be my play. But I'm not an attorney. I just play one on TV. The death of a Telemundo reporter in New Orleans last week may have uncovered a rare female serial predator, if not serial killer. 27-year-old Aiden Manzano was in New Orleans to cover the Super Bowl for Telemundo, Kansas City. His body was found last Wednesday in a hotel room at a Comfort Suites. When police reviewed the hotel's security cams, they saw a woman entering Manzano's room with him at 4:35 a.m., according to NBC News. When his body was found, police discovered that his credit cards were missing, Those credit cards were used at several stores around New Orleans, and those purchases were linked to 48-year-old Danette Colbert. Danette Colbert. Colbert was arrested on Friday and charged with fraud. She has not yet been charged with murder, as the local medical examiner has not yet finished their examinations. Following her arrest, this is where it gets interesting, police fielded many calls from other victims of Colbert, suggesting she may be linked to other thefts and possible murders. Court records in Nevada show 2 cases from 2022 where Colbert was charged with larceny and administering a drug to aid in the commission of a felony. Both cases were dismissed, however, when the victims said they didn't want to testify at trial. Nobody wants to testify about what happens in Vegas. It's supposed to stay in Vegas. So, yeah, obviously they were up to no good, didn't want any part of that. No harm, no foul. She was also charged with fraud in Jefferson Parish in 2019 for stealing more than $1,000 from a man's electronic device. Is that his phone? 2 years before that, she pleaded guilty to other fraud charges. One man who contacted police after Colbert's arrest was a 52-year-old man named David Butler. In 2021, Butler was in New Orleans renovating a house he owned. One night, he went out to a bar in the French Quarter where he was approached by Colbert, who asked if he wanted a drink. Once the drinks came, Butler stepped away from the table for a moment. He kind of walked away, which, rule number 1, you don't do in front of a stranger, but he did it. Anyways, he came back, he finished the cocktail, started feeling very disoriented. Colbert then walked Butler outside to a waiting car, and that's the last thing he remembers. When he woke up, Butler found himself on a mattress on the floor of the home he was renovating. His phone and wallet were gone. He then learned that someone had used his credit cards to buy thousands of dollars of merchandise from Best Buy and Walmart. Colbert had also stolen more than $80,000 he had invested in cryptocurrency. Butler solved that case himself, by the way, when he was able to link the crypto theft to Colbert's Facebook profile and then recognized her from the photos. She was arrested and charged. The case went all the way to trial, where she was convicted. However, the judge in that case decided not to put Colbert in prison. Instead, she was given probation and ordered to pay restitution. Butler has never received a dime. Butler seems to have predicted this obvious outcome in a message he wrote the day of the sentencing, in which he said, quote, "If somebody dies due to her actions in the future, their blood will undeniably be on the hands of those who allowed her to escape real accountability today," end quote. In a tragic twist to the story, Manzano's death comes just a few months after the death of his wife in a car crash last year. Having covered true crime for 20 years, I honestly think most people are genuinely good, and the universe tends toward justice. But every once in a while, you hear a story like this and starts making me feel like that sheriff from No Country for Old Men. I just can't explain anything about this one. I guess the lesson, if there is a lesson here, I guess the lesson is live each day like it's your last. So, be safe out there. Police in Sydney, Australia arrested 7 people Wednesday in a strange scheme to defraud a sex abuse victims fund out of around $1 billion, according to 9 News, which is an Australia station. These funds were set up to compensate victims of sexual abuse that occurred inside the Cooma Correctional Center, but authorities became suspicious when they realized that a third of the prior inmates had submitted nearly identical claims, identically worded claims. They all read like somebody copying your homework type of thing. What they allegedly uncovered was a crime syndicate that would approach former inmates of Cooma Correctional and then coach them on how to write a claim. These people would then deliver the claims to a local law firm in exchange for $2,200 per claim. And they did this thousands of times. The mastermind, say police, is 55-year-old Fotis Antonius, who they are calling a claim farmer. It is illegal in some parts of Australia for people to gather claims like this due to the rampant fraud that comes with it. They also arrested 6 others who allegedly work with Antonius, including the son of Russell Manzer, a former bank robber who became a famous TikToker known for being an advocate for survivors of sexual abuse. What a sentence to unpack right there, right? The government was screwed out of a lot of money, but the real victims here are the men who really were abused inside Cooma Correctional and who will face more scrutiny and disbelief thanks to these jagoffs. Those are the top stories. I've got lots more to come. We got to talk about Salman Rushdie, not Salmon the fish, Salman, the writer. He testified in court this week, and we got to get to that story about the wedding reception. It is nutty. All this and more. Stay tuned. I'll be back in 2 and 2.
Please hang up and try again.
And we're back with more true crime this week, brought to you by Windows Vista. The wow starts now. The author, Salman Rushdie, testified at the trial of his would-be assassin Tuesday at a courthouse in Chautauqua County, New York, according to the New York Times. Rushdie was invited to speak at a summertime arts conference at the Chautauqua Institution in 2022. As he was preparing to deliver a lecture about asylum for exiled writers, a man named Hadi Matar rushed to the stage and repeatedly stabbed the author at least 15 times, blinding him in one eye. Bystanders pulled Matar off Rushdie and contained him until police arrived. This is what Rushdie had to say on the stand. Quote, "It occurred to me quite clearly that I was dying," end quote. Rushdie was airlifted to a trauma clinic in Erie, PA, where he spent 17 days before being transferred to a rehab facility. For 30 years, Rushdie feared something like this would happen. The Iranian government issued a fatwa on Rushdie after he fictionalized parts of the Prophet Muhammad's life in his novel The Satanic Verses in 1989. The trial is expected to last a couple weeks. Matar will also face federal terrorism charges in the months to come. Hopefully this means Rushdie will soon be free to write The Satanic Verses 2, Muhammad Boogaloo. I'm waiting for that one. Toronto police are reviewing the travel history of Ronald Ackerman, suspecting he may have left more victims behind after he was arrested for the murder of a woman 26 years ago, according to VOCM News. Ackerman lives in Gander, Newfoundland, and on Friday he appeared in court in Toronto after he was charged with the murder of 24-year-old Donna Ogliv, who was found dead in a parking lot there in 1998. Police credit a crime podcast for reopening this case. After that podcast came out, a DNA sample was collected from the crime scene and processed by our friends at Othram Labs. The DNA was found at the crime scene but collected very recently, then given to Othram, who do great work, and they were able to link it to Ackerman. According to police, Ogliv had only been in Toronto for 5 weeks when she was killed. Anyone who knew Ackerman back then should contact Toronto police. Strange case out of Boston this week. Last Sunday night, police were called to do a well check on 65-year-old Boston attorney Joseph Donahue, who hadn't contacted his family for a while. When officers arrived at his houseboat, they found 24-year-old Nora Nelson inside, acting all crazy-like. She gave the police a fake name, and eventually the police were like, look, you just, get out of the way, let us in. So once they got inside, they found Donahue's body. It was already wrapped up and duct taped to a bunch of weights. They also found his dog dead in the harbor. And Nelson seems like a very good suspect since they also found her pink fingernails sticking out of his chest. The extensions, the Lee press-on nails. They were, that's pretty good evidence, if you ask me. Nelson seems, anyways, this isn't Nelson's first run-in with the law either. In 2023, she was arrested for assaulting her then 63-year-old boyfriend. No word on how the 65-year-old Boston attorney came to know this 24-year-old woman. It was probably at a bingo game or something innocent like that, I'm sure. Police in Alabama used genetic genealogy to solve a twisty cold case this week, according to WVTM 13. The story begins when human remains were discovered by hunters near Garden City in 2005. Next to the body was a woman's driver's license. Police contacted the woman, who said that her partner, Chad Singleton, had vanished a year before and had taken her ID with him. Case closed, right? Not so fast. See, when police looked into Singleton, they discovered that he'd actually died in 1995. Hold the phone? Shut the front door? Whoever the dead guy was, he wasn't Singleton. He was somebody who stole his identity. And that's where the case kind of went cold. And that's where it was until last week. Genetic genealogy by Moxie Forensic Investigations connected the dead guy's DNA to Patrick Grayson Spann, who was an inmate from Mississippi who walked away from a work release program and never returned. Hey, you know what's easier than changing your name and running from the police until you die in the woods? A Mississippi work release program. Let's jump over to weird news, shall we? Florida attorney Mark Roher was charged this week with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, according to the New York Post. The weapon? A fancy plate. Roher was attending a wedding reception on January 18th and had just gotten in line at the buffet, specifically in front of the prime rib carving station, when two young girls cut in front of him. Roher confronted the girl's father, who ignored him, so Roher, logically, smashed his plate on the man's head. According to witnesses, all hell broke loose after that. The police report states, quote, "Without provocation, the large, bald man struck the slimmer man on the head with a dinner plate. From there on, a melee began," end quote. Roher faces up to 5 years in prison and may be disbarred if he's convicted. Which is a small price to pay, if you ask me. Nobody cuts Renner off at the prime rib station. And now for pop culture. There's a new limited series on Netflix called Apple Cider Vinegar, which is based on the real-life true crime about bullshit wellness guru Belle Gibson, who faked having cancer so she could promote the benefits of apple cider vinegar and other alternative medicine. She was eventually caught using money she raised for charity to buy vacations and designer clothes. Also, you need to see Gibson's interview with 60 Minutes. Just go on YouTube. I should put a link somewhere. But go on YouTube. Gibson's interview with 60 Minutes. It is beautiful. The way that the interviewer handled her and pushed her on specific questions. And watch as she struggles to answer the simplest question, which is, how old are you? She can't do it. Check it out. Caitlin Dever plays Gibson in the series, and she's likely to earn that Emmy, at least an Emmy nod, for her performance there. It's very good. And the true crime book of the week is A Murder on Campus by Brian Santana and Cameron Santana. I wonder if they're related. Spoiler alert, they are. On April 15th, this is the write-up, by the way. On April 15th, 1973, two high school students discovered a young woman's body near the campus of the University of North Carolina, Asheville. The cold case that followed would span over 50 years, involving 3 generations of detectives and the Asheville Police Department and North Carolina SBI as they worked tirelessly to uncover the truth about this young woman's murder, who she had been bound, raped, and stabbed to death, leaving the Asheville community in shock. The true crime book takes readers through law enforcement's dramatic efforts to find this woman's killer, facing numerous obstacles along the way, from the abduction of another UNCA student in 1974 to a rape and murder discovered near the crime scene in 1978. Whispers about the killer's identity have circulated for decades, with theories ranging from an escaped mental patient to one of North Carolina's most notorious serial killers until now. A Murder on Campus is the first to tell the gripping story of this unsolved crime and the surprising twist that led to the author's revelation of the killer's identity in North Carolina's most notorious cold cases. Written by two brothers, one a cop and the other an English professor, This book offers a unique and fascinating perspective on a case that has haunted Buncombe County for generations. A Murder on Campus. Check it out. And that is the show for this week. Thanks for being here, as always. And we've got a couple more weeks of winter because of that stupid groundhog. But spring is on its way. I can feel it. I see the little bits of my daffodils trying to peek out of the frozen tundra. So we're close. In the meantime, cozy up, enjoy some tea, what have you. And in the words of the incomparable Murray Saul, the godfather of Cleveland radio, we gotta. Get down, damn it. True Crime This Week is a Fearful Symmetry production. Photo and artwork are licensed through Shutterstock. If you like the cut of my jib, I have another podcast you might enjoy called The Philosophy of Crime, in which I attempt to solve the big questions behind our true crime obsession by looking to philosophy for answers. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Sit, Brownie, sit. Good dog.